breaking them down, right? Because we know that there are times we have to build molecules, and there are times we have to break down molecules. We do our best to always couple them together so that the exergonic catabolism drives the endergonic anabolism. We try to keep that balanced as best as we can. We are constantly going back and forth between glycogen and glucose, polysaccharide, monosaccharide. We're constantly going back and forth between triglycerides and fatty acid, complex compound here, simpler compound here. We're always going back and forth between proteins and amino acids depending upon where we are in this state between the polypeptide and the single amino acids. We're constantly going back and forth, all of these things. And which way we're going is regulated. And it's regulated for the most part by hormones. And this kind of makes sense. Maybe it makes sense. Things like insulin, let's ignore growth hormone and thyroxine for now, but things like insulin and sex steroids, in particular the androgens, testosterone, really stimulate anabolism, meaning they stimulate building of things. When should I do that? When should that happen? When I have a lot of nutrients, like right after I've eaten, or when it's been a long time since I've eaten? Right after I've eaten, right? Right after I've eaten. On the other hand, there are times, right, when I've eaten a long time ago, right, or whatever, where I need to be taking things I've stored and breaking them down for the body to use. And the hormones that are going to regulate that, let's ignore again growth hormone and thyroxine because they do both. Two in particular, glucagon and epinephrine. Epinephrine's common name is, anybody know? Adrenaline. Adrenaline. These two things cause catabolism, breaking down. Right? And when should that be? When should I break them down? Right after I've eaten or when it's been a long time since I've eaten? When it's been a long time. So belly full, these guys, right? Belly empty, these guys. When I'm fed, right? Yeah. And when I'm, what do you call it when you don't eat? Fasting. When I'm fasting. So this is really what we call, and these are the terms we use. The fed state is right after you've eaten, when you fed. The fasted state is when your stomach's empty. Does that kind of make sense? So these are two antagonistic phases of regulation, right? We have one set of physiologies that occur during the fed state. They're going to be governed by insulin in particular, and it's going to make me want to absorb and uptake as much nutrients as I can from the blood because I'm fed. Then we're going to have the fasted state, which is governed by glucagon, the antagonist of insulin, and that's going to occur when my stomach is empty, right? And I'm going to need to break down stored things. I'm not going to be absorbing glucose at all. In fact, I'm going to be breaking down glycogen and releasing glucose. So they're truly opposites of each other. So these hormones, glucagon and insulin, ever secrete them at the same time? Would be pointless, right? They would counteract each other. So we've got these two states, these fed states and these fasted states, that are governed by these two hormones. Insulin predominant in the fed state, glucagon predominant in the fasted state. In a nutshell, and I'll show you some pictures in a minute, insulin causes your cells, especially cells of the liver and adipocytes, two places where you store energy and take in a lot of energy, to absorb glucose and fat. So you absorb glucose and fatty acids when you've got them, and insulin makes me do that. Okay? On the other hand, so if that's true, then insulin should cause my cells to produce a lot of transport proteins that can transport these things, right? So those glutes we had on there, not these glutes, but those glutes that we talked about before, those glucose transporters, where do you expect cells to have more of them? During the fed state or the fasted state? The fed state. Insulin causes glucose transporters to be put in cell membranes. Glucagon causes them to be taken out. So that's how we actually regulate the uptake of glucose, is by regulating how many of those glucose transporters we have. Insulin makes me have a lot of them. Glucagon, not very many. I don't care about that. This is so these are the two cells